Kenneth Smith's nitrogen gas execution, a descent into cruelty? Did Alabama just redefine inhumane punishment? The execution of Kenneth Smith using nitrogen gas has sparked outrage and debate, raising serious questions about the ethics and humanity of capital punishment in the United States. Give a like and subscribe. Leave a comment. The state of Alabama claims Kenneth Smith lost consciousness rapidly after the nitrogen gas was administered. They painted a picture of a peaceful, painless transition. However, witnesses present at the execution paint a drastically different picture. They reported Smith remained conscious for several minutes, gasping for air and convulsing violently. This discrepancy between the official narrative and witness accounts is deeply troubling. It raises concerns about transparency and the potential for minimizing the suffering inflicted upon Smith. Nitrogen gas execution was presented as a more humane alternative to lethal injection. This was largely due to the state's previous failed attempt to execute Smith via lethal injection in 2022. The failed attempt was attributed to difficulties in finding suitable veins for the injection. The state argued nitrogen hypoxia would be a quicker, more painless method. But was it truly more humane, or simply a more convenient method for the state to carry out its sentence? The evidence suggests the latter. Despite the Supreme Court authorizing his execution, Kenneth Smith faced his final moments with a degree of defiance. He knew what was coming, and he prepared himself. Reverend Jeff Hood accompanied Smith in his final hours, providing spiritual guidance and support. Smith, facing death, seemed to find a strange sense of peace. He comforted those present, even proclaiming his release date. This act of defiance in the face of impending death is both heartbreaking and inspiring. Reverend Jeff Hood's account of Smith's final moments offers a glimpse into the man behind the headlines. He described a man seeking solace and connection. Hood anointed Smith with oil, a symbolic act of healing and preparation. Smith responded energetically to Bible passages, finding strength in his faith. Hood also noted that Smith was moving his head around, like he was listening to music. This detail humanizes Smith, reminding us he was more than just a convicted murderer. Even in his final moments, Smith sought connection with his loved ones. He maintained eye contact with his family, offering them comfort and reassurance. He smiled and made "I love you" gestures, a final expression of love and connection. These gestures highlight the human cost of capital punishment, the families left behind to grieve. These small acts of love and connection stand in stark contrast to the cold, clinical nature of the execution itself. The witness room was a small, sterile space filled with tension and anticipation. 5 journalists and Smith's family were present, forced to witness the state-sanctioned killing. The room had a strong smell of disinfectant, a constant reminder of the clinical nature of the event. The victim's family watched from an adjacent room, their own grief and pain on display. Smith was strapped to a gurney, his body a canvas for the state's final act. The scene was a stark reminder of the power of the state and the vulnerability of the individual. The release of nitrogen gas marked the beginning of Smith's final struggle. Witnesses reported he appeared to struggle for breath for approximately 4 minutes. He tried to free himself from the restraints, his body convulsing in protest. The scene was far from the peaceful, painless death the state had promised. Reporter Marty Roney counted the seconds between Smith's breaths, a grim reminder of the slow, agonizing process. Roney described Smith convulsing and the gurney shaking, painting a picture of intense suffering. Commissioner John Hamm attempted to explain Smith's behavior, suggesting he tried to hold his breath. This explanation was met with skepticism and outrage. Hamm attributed Smith's movements to involuntary actions and expected side effects. This attempt to downplay Smith's suffering was seen as disingenuous and insensitive. The state's explanation failed to address the core issue, the potential for nitrogen gas execution to inflict unnecessary pain and suffering. Mike Sennett, son of Elizabeth Sennett, was present at the execution. He sought closure after decades of grief and pain. Sennett described the almost total silence during Smith's convulsions, a silence broken only by the sounds of Smith's struggle. He noted Smith tried to get up, a desperate attempt to escape his fate. Sennett admitted to being haunted by Smith's violent final moments. This admission highlights the lasting impact of capital punishment, even on those who believe in it. The execution ended at 8:15 p.m. local time, marking the end of a long and painful chapter. Mike Sennett expressed relief that the ordeal was over, but the questions remain. Deanna Smith, Kenneth's wife, criticized the humanity and compassion of the procedure. She described Smith's seizures and struggle to breathe, challenging the state's narrative. Deanna Smith also questioned the presence of the press, highlighting the voyeuristic nature of the event. The execution of Kenneth Smith has sparked a global debate about the ethics of capital punishment and the potential for inhumane treatment. This case demands further investigation and scrutiny. We must ask ourselves, what does it say about our society when we resort to such methods of punishment? The execution of Kenneth Smith was not just the end of a case. It was a descent into cruelty. We must demand accountability and work towards a more just and humane system of justice. Call to action. This is not the end of the story. We need to demand transparency and accountability from our government. Contact your representatives and demand an investigation into the execution of Kenneth Smith. Share this video to raise awareness and spark conversation. Support organizations working to abolish the death penalty and advocate for criminal justice reform. Let's ensure that what happened to Kenneth Smith never happens again. His suffering must not be in vain.